Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has dismissed reports that he plans to resign, calling the claims completely unfounded. A source close to Ishiba says he is staying in office, at least still a trade deal with the US is finalized by the August 1st deadline. US President Donald Trump says the US has sealed a massive trade deal with Japan, calling it perhaps the largest ever made. Under the agreement, US tariffs on Japanese goods will rise to 15%, while Tokyo pledges a $550 billion investment in America. Ukrainian president confirms peace talks begin in Istanbul today as Moscow plays down hopes for a breakthrough. The meeting comes amid US pressure and talk of prisoner exchanges, but the Kremlin says its goals remain unchanged. Over 100 aid and rights organizations have issued an urgent call for action as hunger deepens in Gaza, demanding an immediate, permanent ceasefire and the removal of all aid restrictions. The group says starvation is spreading while truckloads of life-saving supplies remain blocked outside the Strip. After a 5-year freeze, India will resume issuing tourist visas to Chinese nationals from July the 24th. The move marks a significant step towards repairing ties damaged by the 2020 border clash and subsequent trade restrictions. US President Trump announces a 19% tariff on imports from the Philippines, calling it part of a beautiful new trade deal with Manila. The agreement also includes Philippine duty cuts on US goods and boosted military cooperation, though Manila has yet to confirm the details. Russia has begun large-scale naval exercises involving 150 warships and 15,000 troops across the Pacific, Arctic, Baltic and Caspian seas. Dubbed July Storm, the drills will test long-range strikes, unmanned systems and readiness for non-standard operations through to July the 27th. US envoy Steve Witkoff will travel to Rome this week to push for a ceasefire in Gaza amid mounting humanitarian suffering. He's expected to meet Israel's Ron Dermer and a senior Qatari official on Thursday, according to Axios. Now, our top story today. President Donald Trump has struck a trade agreement with Japan, slashing tariffs on Japanese auto imports from 27.5% down to 15%. In return, Tokyo has pledged a $550 billion investment and loan package aimed at strengthening US supply chains in key sectors. The news sent Japan's Nikkei stock index soaring nearly 4%. Japan's top negotiator, Akazawa, spoke about the trade deal. Let's listen in to what he said.
まさに守るべきものは守った上で、日米両国の国益に一致する形での合意を実現することができたというふうに確信をしております。
US auto manufacturers, however, have voiced concern over the deal, citing unequal tariff treatment compared to North American-built vehicles. Meanwhile, China spoke about the trade deal. Let's listen in to what was said.
中方一贯主张各方通过平等对话协商解决经贸分歧，维护良好的国际经贸合作环境。
Now, in another related development in Japan, it's being speculated that Prime Minister Ishiba intends to resign following a significant electoral setback. However, Ishiba has firmly denied these claims, describing them as completely unfounded. We're now joined by our guest, Dr. Tomohiko Taniguchi, who's a former advisor to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Thank you very much, Dr. Taniguchi, for joining us here on NewsX World. I first of all wanted to get into this topic of this newly agreed trade deal today, voiced by President Donald Trump as one of the greatest deals ever, according to the US president. How significant here is the 50% tariff rate for Japan's auto industry in terms of export volume and profit margins for Japan?
15% is still high, higher than it used to be pre-Trump. However, the nation has for some time been very much worried that eventually Japan's auto industry and other industries might have to suffer 20, 25, 27% tariffs. Compared to that, the reduction has been significant, and I think the nation as a whole has taken a sigh of relief looking at the reduction of the tariff rates from 25 to 15. And it's been reflected by the little surge that you saw in the Tokyo Stock Index.
And Dr. Taniguchi, given Japan's heavy reliance on US auto markets, what short-term and long-term effects do you anticipate on Japanese car makers' strategies?
Japanese car makers' strategies will not change because after a tense period of friction after friction that those two nations, America and Japan, underwent in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and well into the 2000s, most of the Japanese car makers have had a massive amount of investment already in the United States. And they all understand it's very much imperative for those companies to continue operating manufacturing businesses in the United States. So this being the case, the reduction of tariff is not going to be so much effective as regards changing car makers' strategies.
Another thing, a $550 billion investment in the United States for Japan. That's a lot of money. Is this reciprocal in your eyes, Dr. Taniguchi?
It is a massive amount of money for sure, but so long as it is investment in 10, 20, 30 years, you will be looking at profits, you will be looking at returns. So politically speaking, it is an expression of a pledge from the Japanese side that the country is going to betting still on the future prospect of the United States.
Now let's move on to rumours of Shigeru Ishiba and the future of his leadership in Japan. There was obviously a lot of rumours swirling around that there was going to be a possible resignation from Ishiba today. However, there's also been further reports that he is postponing his resignation ahead of the August the 1st deadline. How might this leadership uncertainty affect Japan's implementation of this deal?
When it comes to implementing the tariff deals, this is going to be out of political battle playing out in Tokyo at the moment. The deal is deal, it's set, and it's waiting to be sealed. And whoever is going to be prime minister in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, the deal is not going to be changing because you're looking at both ends. The United States under Donald Trump has already said that they have struck the deal.
Yes, and finally, how would you have analysed so far Prime Minister Ishiba's tenure in office, giving both the geopolitical and economic uncertainty that's going on right now?
Under the parliamentary system that Japan's running, the Japanese Prime Minister is always the chief campaign manager. So whatever he does or he does not as Prime Minister, as a campaign manager, it is very much evident that he has failed badly, not only once, twice, but 3 times in a row. The Americans and the Japanese say, 1 strike, 2 strikes, and 3 strikes, you're out. It's a baseball term, and grassroots rank and file foot soldiers of the Liberal Democratic Party are voicing more loudly than ever before concerns to continue to have Mr. Ishiba as their campaign manager. So let's see how this will play out.
Yes, and do apologise, just finally, how do internal factions within the LDP view Ishiba's handling of this trade deal specifically, and how could that pressure him towards stepping down?
I could only guess, but I think there is a sentiment that let us be a bit kinder to Ishiba. The other party, if you like, within the same party might say, this won't be enough. And it's been proven that Mr. Ishiba cannot lead the pack, cannot lead the campaign going forward. So it's going to be very much a hot summer.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Tomohiko Taniguchi, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. We now move on, staying in the Indo-Pacific, where heavy rains from multiple weather systems have triggered severe flooding across the Philippines, leaving at least 7 people dead and affecting more than 1.4 million residents nationwide. The capital city, Manila, declared a state of calamity after floodwaters submerged roads and forced over 70,000 people to flee their homes. Schools and government offices were shut while evacuation centres filled up overnight. Here's what some of the locals had to say.
Mahirap kasi, tingnan mo ang sitwasyon ngayon, no? Puro tubig, wala kaming, hindi namin alam kung paano kami makakapagtrabaho. Baha na sa harap. Tiyak na baha na yan pag uwi ko. Kanina hindi pa. Baka ngayon baha na sa... Walang tigil kasi yung ulan eh.
Mahirap ma'am. Kasi kung tuloy-tuloy ang ulan, siyempre yung mga taong nandito sa paligid, aapaw yung ilo.
Tropical storm Wifa, which skirted the country on Friday, caused rivers like Marikina to swell dangerously, displacing tens of thousands in nearby low-lying areas. One driver's body was recovered 4.5 kilometers downstream after being swept away by the floodwaters. Despite waters beginning to recede in some areas, a newly formed tropical depression off the east coast is expected to bring more heavy rain through the week. The National Weather Agency issued its highest level red warning on Tuesday, forecasting up to 200 millimeters of rainfall in certain parts of Manila. Flooding has now become routine in Metro Manila, prompting renewed calls for better drainage systems and long-term climate adaptation. We now move over to the US, where it is sending a senior envoy to Europe for talks on securing a ceasefire and establishing a humanitarian aid corridor for Gaza. Officials say Steve Witkoff, President Trump's lead negotiator, will travel this week to meet European counterparts with the possibility of heading to the Middle East thereafter. The State Department says Witkoff carries a strong hope of securing a new ceasefire deal and aid flow that both sides have allegedly agreed to do. However, details remain scarce. Officials did not clarify how this initiative ties into the controversial Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a program backed by the United States and Israel, which has been linked to deadly incidents. We're now joined by our guest, Dr. Alvite Ningthujam, who's a Deputy Director and Assistant Professor at Symbiosis School of International Studies located in Pune. Thank you very much for joining us. How realistic is it, Doctor, that it is to secure such an agreement by Hamas on a humanitarian corridor in this region, especially as the US as a broker and aid distribution as such a contentious issue?
Yeah, thanks for having me again this afternoon for the show.
Pleasure.
Am I audible to you?
Yes, you are, certainly.
Right. See, it's probably if Hamas have to admit to some sort of a ceasefire, it could be because of the dire consequences for the circumstances which we are witnessing right now in Gaza Strip. So for the last several weeks, we have been seeing a lot of push and pull with regard to the negotiations which are going on between the two sides, of course, with the help of the external players like Qatar or the US, to come to some sort of an agreement between the warring parties, the Israelis and the Hamas, and settle down for a ceasefire. So it remains to be seen on what ground both the sides would agree to the proposed 60-day ceasefire, which we all are discussing right now, because the Israelis are really hell-bent on destructing every sort of presence of Hamas that could come back as a threat in the near future. But at the same time, is there a guarantee to end the conflict even after the ceasefire comes into effect? That remains to be a big question which everybody would need to answer. And of course, the entry of humanitarian aid for the Palestinians is something which has become a major problem. And I've discussed this in your channels every now and then about the growing concerns with the lack of basic amenities inside the Gaza Strip. So there are few factors, very sticking points pertaining to the guarantee with regard to the end of the war. That is the first one. The second one being the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Gaza Strip, or if there is going to be a redeployment, should there be a requirement for such a scenario. And at the same time, the uninterrupted entry of humanitarian aid into the Palestinian territory. These are very sticking points, and I would not be able to. If nothing can happen, if anything can happen in the Middle East. It's a signal that the international community again has taken some serious cognizance of the problem which we are having right now.
Yes.
Witkoff is of course planning towards Israel and Italy to have these discussions with the international partners to come to some sort of agreeable solution for both sides. So we'll have to see how that pans out over the next few hours or days.
Yes, Dr. Ning Thao Jam, you did just mention it, the fact that you had these 29 countries come out yesterday asking for unrestricted aid access, particularly that driven by the United Nations after weeks and weeks of controversial Gaza Humanitarian Foundation operations. We've also today, we've seen over 100 aid organizations speak out and reiterate the same message. There's a lot of pressure coming from all different angles towards Israel in regards to mainly this issue. Do you see that pressure working, especially given the recent climate?
Yeah, of course, building up of this sort of a pressure would also leave some impact on Israel, I believe. But we have seen different kinds of statements coming from the Prime Minister of Israel in the last, ever since they started with this war in Gaza Strip, that we are not going to back out or surrender to the brute forces or Hamas or any other actors that are trying to disturb peace and tranquility of Israel. If we look at the trajectory of this conflict since 7th October, in the initial days, there have been many supports, that came in towards the Israeli side. Because of the nature of how the Hamas had carried forward the attack on the early morning of 7th October. But with the continuation of this assault operations inside Gaza Strip and also the compounding security concerns on the humanitarian crisis inside Strip, there are a lot more challenges there are a lot more pressures which are coming from different parts of the world. So the 29 or the 28 nation statements coming in the last day or a half, and also about the signal that there are signals given by 100 odd NGOs that there's going to be a severe humanitarian crisis. This could, of course, put some pressure on Israel. But at the same time, if you look at the nature of this conflict this time, it's unlike the 70s, 1973, when they had the October War. Quite a few countries imposed oil embargo on US and unique allies that supported Israel, but that is not the case right now. So you also have seen some sort of differences in the way how the regional countries or the parties reacted to it. And if you look at the countries that have come out, with those statements pressurizing Israel to improve the humanitarian assistance inside the Gaza Strip. How many of them would matter to Israel even if they have to put lots of pressure? That is also a question. So the involvement of the Americans, particularly, should make some difference in this conflict. That one country, if you would say, that could make the Israelis, course correct some of their actions, could be the United States. I don't know how much of a weight the other countries, but again, to come all at the same time simultaneously without diplomatic pressure or economic pressure could be problematic for Israel, because Israel is constantly in the search for partnerships to enhance their security and strategic partnerships with various countries in different parts of the world. But if these countries have decided to come back with a lot more pressure in the times ahead, that's going to be a little bit of a problem for the Israelis.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Alvite Ning Thaujam, on the programme. Some great insight there. We now move on once again. China has strongly protested the European Union's latest sanctions over the Ukraine war after 2 Chinese banks were included in the bloc's 18th package of measures against Russia. Commerce Minister Wang Wentao raised solemn representations with EU chief Marko Sefcovic, warning against targeting Chinese institutions. The sanctions also hit Russian oil exports and a refinery in India, aiming to squeeze Moscow's global ties. Beijing denies aiding Russia's war effort, saying the EU's move is unjustified. The dispute comes ahead of Thursday's summit in Beijing between top EU leaders and Chinese officials. We're now joined by Asuma Katoka, who's joining us from the NewsX World newsroom to give us some more information. Asuma, what more can you tell us about this situation?
So now tensions are rising and they are pretty high between EU and China, as talks are set to begin tomorrow as China hosts EU, including Antonio Costa and Ursula von der Leyen. And this will be hosted by President Xi Jinping himself. He will be present during some of these talks. We don't know which ones for sure, but he his office has mentioned that he will be also taking part in these talks. Now, this comes amid 18 sanctions put on by Europe, EU towards Russia to curb some of Russia's income based on their oil, but it's very skeptical to how will these work, because now that it's in 18th, you have to know that there were 17 more sanctions already put in US, and China has commented saying that this is discriminatory. Also, China has commented on or shown concerns over EU sanctions towards 2 of their financial institutions, and earlier also we saw that India's refinery is also sanctioned by EU regarding in attempts to curb some income towards for Russia's.
Yes,
Yes,
Asuma, thank you very much for joining us and giving us some context on that story. We now move over to Europe, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi begins a 4-day diplomatic tour to the United Kingdom and the Maldives, with strategic ties and trade at the top of the agenda. The visit to the UK marks Modi's fourth trip to the country and comes at the invitation of British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. During the 2-day stay in London, Modi is set to formally sign the landmark India-UK Free Trade Agreement, a deal expected to double bilateral trade from $60 billion to $120 billion by 2030. The Cabinet cleared the agreement on Tuesday, capping months of negotiations. The 2 sides will also review the India-UK Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, with focus on areas including technology, defence, education and climate. Modi is also expected to meet King Charles III. The Prime Minister will then head to the Maldives from July the 25th to the 26th, in a trip seen as a crucial reset of ties strained under the pro-China presidency of Mohamed Muizzu. Well, that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.